Hello. Welcome to Retreat and Learn. I am Brianna Bowling. I am the founder of Retreat and Learn, and I am really excited today because we have Margarita Rozenfeld. Margarita is an organization and leadership development expert. She's a frequent speaker on topics of leadership, cross-cultural communication, diversity, and organizational development. I met Margarita many years ago when she helped the company that I was currently owning at that time to formulate a strategic plan. And we've stayed in touch since then, mainly because Margarita is a great resource. And so I'm really excited that we get to have her here today. If you are live with us now, please say hi. It's really great to know who's in the room with us. It makes us feel better. And I got to tell you, it's nerve-wracking doing this live. So it makes us feel better to know who's here with us. And as we talk today, please post your questions in the comments and we can answer them live. And if you want to find future talks or past topics, you can follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel, or you can simply go to retreatandlearn.com and sign up for our email list. So with that said, I am really super excited to bring in Margarita. So hello.
Hello, I'm so delighted to be with you today, and anybody who is joining us live and all of you who are going to be listening and watching this afterwards. It's such a delight to be with you again.
Yes, it is. I very much enjoyed. We talked a couple weeks ago preparing for this, and it's just a really great joy to reconnect with you and all of your. You just have a really great positive energy. So I'm just very happy to have you here today. So with that, that's actually kind of leads us into my first question. This is a topic that is near and dear to you. Why is it near and dear to you? What makes you so passionate about the topic of inclusion in the workplace and making sure that people feel included?
Yeah, thank you for starting out that way. So I'm very deeply mindful and aware of where we are historically and politically at this very moment, and just the level of exclusion and pain and anguish that so many of our brothers and sisters feel in this climate. And having come from the former Soviet Union, like as a Jewish immigrant, I kind of have this deep place in my heart for people's need and desire to be deeply included. My family was persecuted in the former Soviet Union for being Jewish, and then when we immigrated to the United States, we were not super welcomed as immigrants. And so I think that, growing up and feeling so on the outer fringes of all societies that I basically grew up in, I think it really made me highly sensitized to people's experiences, to their experiences around having their voices included to help people who don't often or always have the power or the capacity to express themselves or to be included in ways that is really meaningful. So over the last 20 years, my company has tried to do that. It's just really helping organizations do better and integrating all voices and engaging teams and employees and helping people connect with one another in more meaningful ways. So when it comes to any topic related to equity inclusion, I feel deeply passionate and personal about it. And so even though we're going to focus today specifically on more of like hiring and kind of reintegrating staff members, especially during these difficult pandemic times, I want to make sure that it's just a slice of a topic around inclusion.
No, and it is, and I think that's one of the reasons why you are so effective at what you do is that you're not just trained in this. You have actual empathy for the situation. You've experienced it. You've experienced what it's like to come into a new workplace. You've experienced not feeling included, and I think that gives you a great perspective in terms of how you approach this. So I think that empathy goes a long way, and I feel it. I know that I feel it personally. So I think it goes a long ways. So are there anything like as somebody's getting ready to, is there any before somebody even comes into the workplace, the days leading up to somebody, a new employee starting or somebody being reintegrated into the workplace, are there steps or what are the things that an employer should start thinking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that it actually needs to go back even further, and I'm going to stay away from anything like kind of human HR,
Right.
safety issues, because that's not my core expertise. And there are so many experts that have
Mhm.
great perspectives on this. But from like kind of a thinking through strategy and inclusion is what my area of the pie is. And I think it's really important for organizations to be clear about who it is that they want to hire and how they want their hiring process to be. And from the perspective of inclusion, it's really important that the person or the people that they're bringing into the team are a really good cultural fit, and
Mm.
that people who are in the organization already, who are getting a new colleague, are as involved as feasible and practical in hiring or connecting to who that person is going to be. I'll give you an example. I work with an organization that serves survivors of domestic violence, and they were recruiting a new deputy executive director. And we spend a lot of time thinking through like who is that who would that person need to be from a functional perspective, like what kinds of skills do they need to bring to the table, as well as how do they need to fit culturally. And in an organization that both works with survivors of trauma but also has a lot of employees who have been through trauma of various kinds, it was really important to make sure that they bring in somebody who is incredibly trauma informed, but is also a really strong leader and manager, and that people trust. And it was a very extensive, they had a board member who was an HR person who helped them kind of structure the job description, that was really solid. And then from the organizational development perspective, which is how I am involved in the organization, we spent a lot of time with the senior management team, kind of really thinking about how that person is going to be onboarded, like what is the thoughtful process by which they're going to come on into the organization and transition in, and how is the rest of the staff going to be included even in like the kind of hiring process. And ultimately they formed a committee of kind of a hiring committee that went from all the way from the executive director to line staff members. And the final candidates they interviewed together because they really wanted to make sure that it's a good functional fit and that the person feels deeply chosen and included from the very beginning. So the candidates that they chose just could not have been a stronger fit, I think, in part because they were so thoughtful and mindful. And I'll talk a little bit about just general onboarding process or integration, whether it's during these pandemic times or outside of that. But I think that process about having a clear role and a job description, like helping the person or the candidates understand how that role fits into the overall mission and if it's a good fit for them, and being very honest and transparent about what to expect, is really, really crucial. And like I said, just making sure that if you're really wanting to include deep inclusion, that whoever is going to be most impacted by that hire, that they're really involved in even like the description of what the job is going to be, and making sure that it's a really solid process and role, all before that person even even gets selected.
So I mean, I think you touched on something in terms of like making sure that your current staff are very much involved in the hiring process, and that helps encourage that you actually get a candidate that's going to fit the culture. And so I think that is very helpful. But and sometimes, and I know I've experienced this when we're hiring people, that let's say that you have an office that's immensely a lot of people who are very outgoing, very verbal, always talking, wanting to know everybody's personal business. They're that type of organization. And then the perfect candidate happens to be somebody who's very, introspective and just kind of, wants to sit in their cubicle and not be asked, what they did that weekend.
Mhm.
And that's going to happen where they're just a different type of person. How would you suggest making sure that that person feels comfortable and also the existing staff feel comfortable with that fit?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually had this happen in one of the organizations I work with in training and development capacity. They're an incredibly kind of like, there's I think about 20 of them now. It's a very small organization, but they're very tight knit. They've been through a lot together, and they hired in the last year like 3 or 4 new staff, and it drastically impacted their culture because it was like almost a quarter of staff was new. But the leader is just fantastic. You know, she and I have worked together in multiple organizations, and she keeps bringing me with her wherever she goes. But she's an incredibly conscious leader, and she really wanted to make sure that people felt like really seen, and that their individuality was honored even within this culture. So they have a space where when they are in fact in physical presence of each other, they would have lunch. And I did some interviews after that, both with existing and newer staff members, and they talked about how they did feel initially a little bit of pressure, but they got such an overt message around, you're welcome however you are. Anytime you want to join us, you're welcome to. Anytime you want alone time, please take it. And then they actually did a lot, so when that group started kind of within the first few months, we had kind of a team development session for the whole office. And we even did like a personality assessment that helped people see each other's preferences, so that it became much more overt. And the conversation around, like, yeah, sometimes I feel pressure to hang out with you all, even though I want to go to my office and close the door. And just like that dialogue and transparency of people saying, yes, we want to be welcoming to all styles of work, or of workers, and all individual preferences, and just even having like language to be able to have that dialogue, and for that feedback to be welcome. And it starts, of course, at the leader level, because she is so interested in it, and she's constantly asking me to bring tools and ways for her staff to have these meaningful conversations that are in depth. So I think, as we're thinking about any organization, whether they have somebody like me or not, is to like really think to be very thoughtful and intentional about what is your current culture, and what do you need to let your candidates know about your culture, so that they know whether to, sometimes they'll select in or out, and, they can ask thoughtful questions about, well, or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe the office is much more, maybe, or somebody's coming into the environment now where people are kind of in their own environments, and how do we do that? So, we can certainly go into that topic. Yeah, I wanted to mention a couple of ways, if it's okay, like
Sure.
how
Yeah.
onboarding can happen, this first few days or weeks in the current environment where most people are teleworking, or in environments where people are teleworking much of the time, regardless of, being amidst a pandemic or not, because there are a lot of virtual workplaces that have been that way, or distributed workplaces that have been that way for a long time.
But let me rephrase that. I just want to make sure we're going the right. So what you're going to go over is just how to onboard somebody who's going to either work telework, or your office typically hasn't been teleworking, but now they are. And so how do you do the onboarding process when everyone's going to be teleworking, or that particular person is? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure I understand where we're going. Okay, great. I think that's a perfect topic, because I know that our company is struggling with that.
Working, and I get inspired. I'm like, let me give you all this information, and I love that you're like, wait, let's focus.
No, it's great. I just want to make sure I understand where we're going. This is perfect, and because it's such a needed topic in terms of where we're going with the offsite. And actually, and we finish this, I have a question for you too, but keep going. I like it. I like where we're going.
Interrupt my inspiration, because otherwise I'll just.
That's great. I love it. Keep going.
So I have a couple of notes that I'm going to reference, just because I was like, I wanted to actually be focused.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's really important, obviously, once somebody is hired, is to make sure that they connect with all the people that they're going to be working with. And so before they even start, so we're already now together at a point where somebody has been hired, offer letter, they're about to start. It's great to give them exposure to their new team before they even start, whether they're going to start in person or remotely. Either way, it's actually kind of the same. Otherwise, it's just it's kind of a cold turkey kind of a start, which makes it more challenging. So depending on the level, we already talked about, people helping to hire. So hopefully a good number of folks have already had exposure to this individual. And one of the things that's important is to understand what is this person excited about? What are they concerned about? So that, as they're getting ready to begin, those concerns and things that they're enthusiastic about can be discussed, and they're starting to feel more comfortable.
So would you ask that of just that person, or would you try, you said it's important they meet everybody. Do you think it's important, or is it easier, especially when they're teleworking, to maybe have like a group meeting, like a group Zoom, or is it better to do them one by one, have them meet individual people remotely?
Yeah, that's a
And
really good question. I think that, like for example, in the organization, some of the organizations I work that are small to mid-size, and a lot of the folks that I work with are like senior management team and above, and then like staff, with engagement, inclusion, and making sure like we're kind of bringing everybody to the same level. But and like some of the smaller organizations, it might be feasible for them to spend quite a bit of time with the with the CEO or whoever is the kind of hiring manager, and maybe then they get to meet the rest of the team as a team, and some of the people that they have a more like reporting relationship. They may it may be helpful for them to spend quite a bit of time in advance, or maybe the person that they're replacing, or the person that there is going to be, or people that are going to be reporting to them. So I think that, depending on where the person is in the organization and the size of the organization, that might change. But the kind of conceptually, what I would love for us to think about is, who are the people who are going to be most impacted by this new person coming in, and who is going to impact them most strongly? And those are the folks that is important to spend individual time with, before the hiring process or before they start, but also, especially in the beginning as they begin the process, because they need to have those touch points and institutional connection and memory, and develop those relationships that they're going to need to rely on for a while to come.
right.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. And actually, we just got a question really closely linked to that. I'm actually going to put it up. I think I know how to do this. Let's see. But it's from Amanda. So during our COVID-19 closures, we've hired and onboarded a number of staff virtually. How would you go about integrating those new staff members upon returning post-COVID? So it's not just, they're working remotely, but they were and now they're not. And so how
Yeah. Let's
your
see.
same
So
process
the
doesn't
hiring and
apply.
onboarding staff virtually. Okay, great. So we're already kind of like at the virtual process. So for those of you who are just kind of catching up with us and Amanda, so some of the things that is like, one of the things that I really like doing with organizations is, when I was doing this live, I would help them develop a timeline of their organization and what things happen at different phases of that organization or that team, with, sometimes pictures and artifacts that will tell the story of this team or this organization or both. And then when somebody gets hired, the whole team takes them through that chronology and share stories with them. And it's a wonderful thing to do with team members, whether it's when they are first beginning, like even though you could do it on the first day, but sometimes you can do it, a few days or a few weeks into them being hired. So for Amanda and others who are wondering the same thing, that is one of the things that you could really do, is kind of create a time together as a team to share stories, to share some of the things that matter to each team member about this organization, and kind of like things that they could never find out. I mean, I've done this with organizations, Brianna, of like people who've been there for like 10 years, and there was somebody who was there 15, 20 years, and they're sitting there and they're like, how did I not know this thing happened that was so
Mhm.
foundational to us? 2 years before I started, it never came up, like in the
Right.
previous 10 years. But when you do something like this, and this is a really easy activity to do virtually, and it creates such a level of connection and cohesion in groups that it's just a really beautiful process. And you can do it, like you could do it kind of graphically, and there's all kinds of obviously ways you can use technology for that, but something like that is fantastic. And then was there another part of the
Well,
question that
well,
we
it
didn't
was, and
respond
it's kind
to?
of along the same lines. She also did a follow-up question, as HR professionals, what support can we offer to help them transition to working on site? So, I mean, I think what you just suggested is one great way because they kind of get to know the culture and the corporation beforehand. But
Wow.
or maybe are there's, I think what her question is more along the specific steps. Are there things that,
Sure.
as they're walking in the door to help them get orientated to their new
Yeah.
space too?
This is a really good question. And also, like, I want to kind of maybe build off of that to talk about how to reintegrate members who had been on site perhaps,
Mm,
now were teleworking and now coming back, because this is
right.
becoming this is one of the biggest challenges that I'm hearing from my clients. So for the folks who were onboarded virtually and are now coming in, obviously there are things that they're going to need to know. Where are the restrooms? Where is
Right.
the coffee? Like all these
Right.
simple things that we take for granted. So maybe they have like a mentor, or like a peer kind of buddy, that they can kind of do like a physical walkthrough, or maybe the team walks through and welcomes them into the space. I think that given that we're still not certain about kind of distances and safety things, it's kind of hard to predict what the kind of physical manifestation of this might look like, and how it might happen. But actually, even like doing a virtual tour for this person before they even get there, somebody doing like a little walkthrough with their
Right.
phone,
I actually like
and
that. I think
saying,
the idea of maybe even for like all your new team members having like a day, like an orientation day where you walk through and maybe they can
exactly
even
like
ask
a college
questions like, wait a
orientation.
minute, is that the coffee maker? And is that a Keurig or what kind of coffee do we have?
Yeah, exactly. And so I feel like we have these parallel tracks. One is like this really practical, like, do we wear gloves and masks now? Do we need to change configuration? Again, all of that I'm going to leave to experts to
Sure.
discuss. But I want to talk a little bit about also like the kind of the psychological part about people leaving their home environment, whether they had been in that office in the past or not, and coming back, or coming into an environment that is very different than where they have resided and worked over
Mhm.
the last chunk
Right.
of time. And I sent you in advance, Brianna, a graphic
Yep.
for the William Bridges model that some of you watching may be familiar with. William Bridges is a social scientist, and he came up with this model to kind of help us think through transitions. He found that people going through all kinds of transitions, even positive ones, have different responses at different phases. And he separated those phases into the endings, neutral zone, and beginning. So as we're looking at this bell curve on the left of the screen, we have like fear, anger, grief, all these things that are accompanying the endings. And even though so many of us are eager to get back to the workplace, and just all transitions, positive ones, when we get our dream new job, it means that our social network from our previous job is ending. So we have grief and all kinds of emotions associated with that. In the neutral zone, we're kind of starting to integrate. There's still uncertainty, still a little bit of discomfort. And then when we come out of that, it's like in the beginning, it could be excitement, it could be planning and purposefulness and creativity. But in the initial phase, and all of us go through these phases at different times. So I might bounce into the office and be like, fantastic, I'm so excited. Here's my new desk, or here's my old desk. and somebody else might be like really missing spending time with their family or their pets, or like that they had a terrible commute now that they didn't have for 2 months. And so we're all going through different processes. So what's really important for managers to think about as we're kind of going to this next phase is to be really thoughtful and deliberate about connecting with each individual and understanding where we all are, and not treating everybody the same. This goes to this like inclusion idea. We're not all coming from the same circumstances. Some people have lost a family member to COVID or violence or anything. We don't know what's happened, and so we want to make sure that we're not having the same set of expectations of like, okay, well, we're back and everything is back to normal. Well, it's not. As we know, nothing is normal for so many folks right now, and we can't presume that. So we need to have a lot of patience and grace, and train our managers to like be really, really thoughtful and caring about people as they're going through these different phases of whatever the new normal or the new environment becomes.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, because I think a lot of people are going to some people have really enjoyed their time home. Some people, it has been very difficult for them. They feel isolated, and they might be happy to come in, but it's still also, it's going to be a little shock to their system. And so I think even the ones excited to come back to the workplace may have a lot of transition time with that. So I think there's a really good points, and just to be aware of it, and also maybe to state it out loud so that people know that it's okay to feel differently.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like whether we're hiring a new person and whatever part of the timeline they've hired, or people are kind of coming back, one-on-one time is going to be really important for managers with their staff and for teams to have together, again, in whatever way, whether it's 6 feet apart or even now virtually. I think that having gone through these things, as you pointed out, people have different personalities. Some people, for many groups, it's really important to share stories. We've been through this really intense period together, and making meaning of it as a group, as a team, could be a really bonding experience. And there are people who may not feel like sharing, and it's okay to pass. It may be too painful or too intimate right now to share that.
Right.
So creating environments where people feel welcome, they feel come as you are, not as we kind of expect you to be, and really giving people a lot of grace. And then having some of that individual kind of combination of individual attention and team time, which means that productivity may be different, than what we're used to it. Because if we rush it, it's only going to be counterproductive, right? Because we can't force somebody who just lost a family member but may not feel comfortable sharing it, or has been tear gassed, during peaceful protest. Like, we can't know what their experience has been like, and whether they share it or not. If we don't give them that grace, the productivity is not going to get any better. We're forcing somebody to be where they're not.
I'm a big believer that the slower you go, the faster you actually get there, which is always, it seems counterproductive, but it really does work. So
I talked about my Russian background. There's a Russian expression, the quieter you go, the further you'll get.
Right, same idea.
Russian.
Right. All right. Yeah, I get it's cross-cultural. It's great. I know earlier, this question didn't come across while we were speaking today. We did get a question earlier on one of the posts when we were just advertising this, and I'm going to read it just to make sure I get it right. But the question was really about, how do you manage and motivate offsite employees while they're offsite? Is there any tips that you have for that? And part of that obviously is making them feel included, but also, so that you do get some of that productivity back, because it is difficult for people.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that my answer is probably not going to be a whole lot different than my last one. I think that we have now, it's pretty recent, but studies already are coming out that in a completely clearly, consistently state that people are going through a lot right now and expecting the same level of productivity when it was kind of before COVID time. Maybe it will be like BC or something. It's just not realistic. And if we are expecting that, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment and a lot of disconnect. And so I think that having conversations right now with each individual about, as much as they feel comfortable sharing what is, what is motivating to them, what is going to be interesting, like what is the best way for them to get their work done, and like really what is realistic for this person. I have one client group in New York where I'm coaching several of the leaders, and it's challenging. If one of our values as an organization and individuals is productivity, and so is the employees, but the employee has two small children, and both she and her spouse, and in that household they're likely to have two adults, but still they're having to work alternate schedules. They're having to kind of modify everything. And so she's only available to work for like 5 hours a day. And that's that's what, and so by the time she gets to her 5 hours, and then her spouse has those 5 hours. But what about people who are single parents, or people who are taking care of elderly, or people, like, we just can't possibly know. So I don't mean to, like, it's not like I'm making excuses for people, but I think the reality is that we really just need to understand where each individual is right now, and what they expect of themselves and what is realistic, and then work with that individual to support them as they as they navigate these really difficult times.
Yeah, I mean, I think so many of this just comes down to communication. I mean, instead of saying, "Hey, I'm going to need this, this, and this done," but say, "Hey, this is what I'm thinking I need to get done," and expressing your needs as an employer, but also, "Hey, can you do this? And what, if not, what can I do to help you? And what can I do?" And maybe they need to work at midnight, whatever it happens to be. But asking the question rather than making the assumption will always get us further.
I think that could just, basically complete this conversation.
It completes so many things.
It's an important point, because I feel like this is really separating true leaders from people who have a manager job, but they're like kind of painting by numbers. You know what I mean? Like, we can say we expect all we want, and yet if a person is not able to do those things that is expected of them, but like kind of neither is anybody else, like if we're really being honest, right? Now,
Right.
there are a few people who are handling everything, well on some days, and I'm one of those people who handles it well on most days, and there are some days where I'm just like, it's not happening, and like, if I have obligations and appointments and interviews, of course I'm going to show up and I'm going to do my best. But there are days where it's just really hard, and I'm not as productive as I expect myself to be. So I think that one of the things we're also struggling with is kind of like our own expectations of ourselves. And
Right.
that's actually often much more difficult for my leader clients than even their expectations of others.
So maybe we need to communicate with ourselves as well. What do we expect from ourselves, and what can we give?
Yeah, I think really good self-care is really important. And we
Right.
talked about, what do we do when we get back to the office? There's all kinds of resources available around mental health and supporting people, and just like assuming that somebody who has a six-figure salary in a corner office is doing great and is not struggling and doesn't need those resources, or somebody who is delivering our mail, is not struggling, or anybody anywhere in the organization is really, we have no way of knowing. And so it's important to have resources for employees available. It's important to be flexible. Also, like, I can't imagine it possibly being 100% back to normal, whatever that means. So it's like, will there be an availability for people to take time, to take care of things that are needed and
Right.
important? Is your company putting those policies in place and practices that, again, allows people to know we care? Because you know what, now that a lot of places are going 100% virtual, or like option for people to go virtual, we're now competing for employees now, not only with people that I live in Washington. So we're not only competing for people for talent in Washington, we're now competing for talent worldwide, because now in virtual companies, people can work from anywhere.
Right.
So
Yep.
if a person who is most qualified for this job sees a company whose culture, it has the flexibility and caring, and they feel like a human being who is deeply cared for and included in another state, they would take that job and not the one that says, here are your cookie cutter expectations, because that's just how we've been working for 100 years. So I think it's really important to think about, like, from talent attaining, and because we started this conversation with kind of recruiting and onboarding people, that's a really important consideration. Like, how are we showing up as employers, and what are we offering our the people who are coming on board? Because people are watching. They're going to be more mindful these days about culture and sensitivity, and how did they support, where are they supporting their staff during the hard times, so that when times are less hard, it's like you want to test people out, or we do test people out when times are difficult. So, this is going to be a tough market if we're not careful and mindful of people's where people are.
I think it's been a great opportunity for us as employers to dig deep and find compassion, and actually probably in an odd way, not having our employees nearby has made us maybe actually get to know them better in a more personal way. So, for me, I think that has been true. I mean, we've gotten to see them in their home place. We've gotten to understand some of their needs and wants and the things that are really hard for them every day. And so I think we're going to take some positive things from this. At least I hope so. I hope that some places will go forward. So is there anything else you want to add in terms of how to integrate people back into the workplace, how to integrate new employees and existing employees back into the workplace? Just before we close up today, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just want to say, it's I think that this time comes with so many opportunities, like you said, to help people, like, really connect, feel seen, feel included in deeper ways. And I am seeing a huge trend that's where it's going, and people are being more flexible and more compassionate and more forgiving of each other, and not always themselves, but each other, for sure. So I feel deeply hopeful that as we're being thoughtful and mindful of each other's kind of space and processes moving into this next phase, that I think that the workplace will actually really benefit in the long run.
I do too.
I think it's just like, has its bumps and bruises along the way, like anytime we grow and expand.
It is. I think, change is difficult, but it usually brings some good stuff. So we just have to wait for it.
Yes.
That's good. Would you like to just mention how, if people want to reach out to you, how to reach you? We will also post it in the comments, and I will also post it on my website, but I would like you to just mention how to reach you, because I'm sure people would like to reach out to you.
Sure. Thank you for asking. I'm delighted to be a resource anytime. Like I said, I do kind of like this work and all kinds of organizational development work. So if I could be a resource to anybody, or a reference source, or even point you to some of these things that we talked about today, don't hesitate to reach out. And my website is www.insight.international. Insight spelled INCITE international.com. I'm Margarita at insightinternational.com, and thank you for posting that information, because it's easier in writing than in spelling.
Yeah, I'll post it in the comments, just on both sides, on the YouTube and also on Facebook. And then I will be posting it on retreatandlearn.com later today, all of her contact information. So you can reach out to Margarita. I can tell you from my own personal experience, Margarita is great to work with. So you should reach out to her. If you're
thank you. And it was such a delight to talk with you, Brianna. Thank you for all the great, insightful questions.
Yeah, it was fun. Anybody who's watching, if you have some further questions, feel free to post them in the comments. I'm sure Margarita will be looking out for them, and I'm sure she would be glad to answer them in those comment section. We have some great interviews coming up that it's actually in 2 weeks. We're going to be talking about strategic storytelling, both for marketing and what else, for anything really. God, strategic storytelling I can't wait for that one. It's gonna be fun. So, if you want to listen in on some of these, definitely follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I would love to see you guys next time on whatever topic we're discussing. So thanks so much. And thanks so much for joining us, Margarita. It's been great.